The following documentary is based on publicly available reports, official investigations, and expert analysis. Some aspects of this case remain actively disputed, and key questions are still unsolved. A modern Boeing 777 carrying 239 people simply vanished. No distress call, no confirmed crash site. Despite one of the largest search operations in aviation history, investigators still cannot answer one simple question. What really happened to Flight MH370? The twin-engine Boeing 777-200ER, registration 9MMRO, was a workhorse of the sky. Delivered in 2002, the aircraft had logged over 53,000 flight hours before its final departure. It was a reliable model with an exceptional safety record, having passed its last major maintenance check just 12 days earlier. At the controls was 53-year-old Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a highly respected veteran with 18,000 hours of flying experience. Beside him sat 27-year-old First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, completing his final training flight to fully qualify on the 777. Behind them in the cabin were 227 passengers representing 14 nations, including families, 20 tech employees, and a group of Chinese calligraphy artists returning home from an exhibition. Just after midnight on March 8, 2014, the flight departed Kuala Lumpur under clear, calm skies. The climb was routine. Air traffic controllers cleared the plane to 35,000 feet as it headed northeast over the South China Sea toward Beijing. On board, nothing suggested this flight would be anything other than a normal, quiet overnight crossing. At 0107, the plane's automated tracking system, ACARS, sent a routine status report confirming it was cruising smoothly at 35,000 feet. 12 minutes later, the flight approached the edge of Malaysian airspace. The handoff to Vietnam was expected next. At 0119, Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control radioed a standard sign-off. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah replied, "Good night, Malaysian 370. There was no hint of trouble, no urgency, and no distress call. It was the last voice transmission ever heard from the cockpit. 2 minutes later, at 0121, the aircraft crossed waypoint Igari. Instantly, the signal vanished from civilian radar displays. Civilian tracking relies on secondary radar, which requires a transponder on the airplane to actively broadcast its identity, altitude, and speed. When the transponder went dark near Igari, the flight's data block simply vanished from air traffic control screens. Vietnamese controllers expected a radio check-in that never came. Operational confusion quickly took hold. For 17 minutes, controllers struggled to establish contact before Ho Chi Minh City officials formally queried Kuala Lumpur. But the aircraft was still moving. Military primary radar, which does not rely on transponders, but instead bounces raw radio waves off the metal hull of an aircraft, continued to track a silent target. This primary radar recorded a sharp westward turn, taking the plane back across the Malay Peninsula, around Penang, and out toward the Andaman Sea. Because military data is incomplete, reports of extreme climbs and descents during this turn are treated with caution. Air defense operators initially classified the radar blip as friendly. They did not alert civilian controllers, causing a costly delay. It was hours before authorities realized the aircraft had gone off route, and by then the trail was cold. The final primary radar contact faded between 0215 and 0221, leaving the Boeing 777 flying into a vast, silent void. Because Flight 370 vanished from civilian radar over the Gulf of Thailand, rescue teams focused their initial efforts on those warm, shallow waters. Navies and spotter planes from Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, and China rushed to the South China Sea, expecting to find wreckage along the aircraft's planned path to Beijing. Within days, a massive multinational response deployed over 40 aircraft and 24 surface ships. But scanning the open ocean from the air is a deceptive task. Spotting debris from thousands of feet up means fighting constant cloud cover, sun glare, and a sea littered with discarded maritime trash. When early calculations redirected the search thousands of miles away, the operation transformed from a surface recovery into the most complex deep-sea hunt in history. Now led by Australia alongside Malaysia, the search shifted to the remote southern Indian Ocean. Here, the practical difficulties were immense. Crews deployed high-tech sonar and autonomous underwater vehicles like the Bluefin 21 to map a rugged mountainous seafloor. They worked in freezing depths reaching 6,000 meters, where crushing water pressure and violent storms frequently forced operations to a halt. By the time the official search was suspended in January 2017, teams had surveyed 120,000 square kilometers of seabed. The effort cost $155 million, making it the most expensive aviation search in history. Yet, it yielded absolutely nothing. Even the most advanced technology cannot find an aircraft when the underlying probability model is wrong. To locate the missing Boeing 777, investigators had to look beyond traditional flight tracking, searching for a completely different kind of clue. The breakthrough in tracking did not come from radar, but from a geostationary satellite floating 36,000 kilometers above the equator. The aircraft's satellite data unit, which had powered back up shortly after the transponder went dark, began exchanging automated signals with the Inmarsat 3F1 satellite. These were not voice messages or telemetry reports, but simple electronic handshakes. Automated requests confirming the plane was still connected to the network. 7 of these handshakes were logged between 0225 and a final partial transmission at 0819. To turn these silent pings into geographic coordinates, engineers from Inmarsat collaborated with the Air Accidents Investigation Branch, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, Boeing, and the NTSB. They relied on 2 obscure pieces of metadata, burst timing offset and burst frequency offset. Burst timing offset, or BTO, measures the exact round-trip travel time of the signal. This allowed analysts to calculate the precise distance between the satellite and the aircraft. Plotting this distance on the globe produced a series of curved rings or arcs rather than a single point. Burst frequency offset, or BFO, measures the Doppler shift, the subtle change in the radio frequency caused by the relative movement between the satellite and the aircraft. This measurement provided a way to estimate the plane's speed and heading. This analysis originally projected 2 vast flight paths, a northern corridor stretching across Central Asia, and a southern corridor heading toward Antarctica. Because a northern route would have crossed highly monitored overland airspace without triggering military radar, and because the BFO data strongly matched a southern track, investigators disfavored the northern option. On March 24, 2014, authorities announced the southern Indian Ocean as the leading search zone. The final partial handshake at 0819 defined a curved boundary known as the 7th arc. By calculating fuel limits, satellite drift, and heading assumptions, analysts established a probable corridor. Yet, this remained a statistical model, not a confirmed impact site. It was a probabilistic map that would soon guide oceanographers attempting to backtrack the physical evidence. On July 29, 2015, a beach cleanup crew on the French island of Réunion found a barnacle-encrusted 6-foot-long piece of metal washed ashore. It was a right-hand wing flaperon. Forensic teams matched its specific part markings, paint layers, and rivet characteristics to 9M MRO, providing the first physical proof that Flight 370 had entered the ocean. Over the next few years, more fragments surfaced along the coastlines of Mozambique, Tanzania, South Africa, Mauritius, Rodriguez, and Madagascar. Investigators categorized these items carefully, confirming some as definitely or almost certainly from the missing Boeing 777, while others remained unconfirmed. To understand where these pieces came from, oceanographers at Australia's CSIRO used computer models to simulate Indian Ocean currents and wind patterns, backtracking the floating debris. This was a probability analysis rather than a precise GPS trail, but it supported the southern search corridor. The physical evidence establishes that the aircraft broke apart in the ocean, and that floating components survived to drift thousands of miles. However, it cannot pinpoint the exact crash coordinates, reveal the final breakup sequence, or prove whether a pilot was actively controlling the aircraft during its final descent into the water. To resolve the mystery of Flight 370, investigators must operate within strict analytical boundaries, separating verified evidence from theory. Under the category of confirmed facts, the physical and electronic record is clear. The aircraft deviated from its filed route, and conventional communications and identification signals were lost. Satellite data indicate that the plane remained airborne for several hours after conventional contact ended. While debris linked to the aircraft eventually washed up in the western Indian Ocean, the primary wreckage and flight recorders remain unavailable. To this day, no definitive cause has been established. Official findings provide the institutional framework. The July 2018 Malaysian Safety Investigation Report left the cause of the disappearance undetermined. Investigators assessed that manual control inputs were the most likely explanation for the aircraft's deviation. However, this finding does not identify who made those inputs or why. No motive or intentional act was conclusively established, and no significant pre-existing maintenance defects were identified that could explain the disappearance. Expert opinions attempt to fill the remaining gaps, dividing the possibilities into distinct, evidence-based theories. The first is the pilot intentional act theory. Supporting considerations include the sharp route changes, the sequential loss of communications, the apparent coherence of the flight path, and a 2016 home simulator route on Captain Zahari's computer that resembled part of the southern trajectory. The weaknesses are substantial. There is no confirmed motive, no cockpit recordings of intent, and no wreckage evidence showing who is in control. The simulator route remains a consideration, not proof of intent. The second is hypoxia or crew incapacitation. A sudden loss of cabin pressure could disable the crew, allowing the aircraft to fly on autopilot until fuel starvation. The weakness is the lack of any confirmed depressurization warning, and the difficulty of explaining how an incapacitated crew could perform the initial, complex route changes. Whether anyone stayed conscious during the final hours remains unknown. The third is mechanical or electrical failure. A sudden emergency could disable electronics and make the plane difficult to fly. However, the aircraft was fully airworthy at departure, and there is no wreckage to examine for structural failure. Whether an unusual failure could disable multiple communication systems without leaving a recoverable warning remains unknown. The fourth is an onboard fire. A fire, perhaps involving the lithium-ion batteries and mangosteens in the cargo, could explain a sudden diversion. Yet, physical testing showed no hazardous interaction between these items, no fire emergency was transmitted, and satellite power remained active for hours. It remains unknown if a fire could disable communications while leaving primary electrical power intact. The fifth is hijacking or unlawful interference. The route changes are broadly compatible with outside intervention. The weakness is the absolute absence of a credible claim, demand, or accomplice. The sixth is a combined event scenario, where a sudden technical emergency followed by incapacitation could mimic a deliberate flight path in the incomplete satellite records. Outside these theories lies speculation. Claims of secret cargo, hidden passengers, unverified military action, or precise final sequences lack any corroborating data. Ultimately, the reconstructed route and missing signals do not prove motive, identity, or criminal intent. No evidence permits assigning blame to Zahari, Farik, or any passenger, and no single theory explains every known fact. If you enjoy factual documentaries exploring history's greatest mysteries, true crime, dangerous places, science, and unexplained events, subscribe to the Atlas Network. In January 2018, private marine robotics firm Ocean Infinity launched a new sweep of the southern Indian Ocean. Operating on a confirmed no-fine, no-fee basis, the company deployed a fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles. These robotic units swam independently near the seabed, mapping rugged terrain with high-resolution sonar. Over several months, they scanned approximately 81,500 square kilometers of ocean floor without success, proving that even the best equipment cannot find an aircraft if the search zone is wrong. Beyond this completed operation, later developments are classified as reported or proposed. This includes reports of renewed search activity in 2025 and 2026, which require official verification by Malaysian authorities. Meanwhile, researchers continue to study refined drift models to narrow where floating material originated. Independent scientists have also re-examined regional acoustic data, suggesting that some signals once thought to be locator beacons were actually marine life. Various alternative wreck site hypotheses have been proposed, but they remain uncorroborated, while new search proposals could improve the odds of discovery. Only the physical recovery of the fuselage, debris field, and flight recorders can provide a definitive resolution. For the families of those on board, neither official declarations nor compensation can replace verified knowledge of the final hours. Their lives remain suspended in a quiet defined by absence. This tragedy forced global aviation to confront a glaring vulnerability. A modern passenger jet must not be allowed to vanish simply because its transponder stops transmitting. In response, international regulators adopted tracking reforms under the Global Aeronautical Distress and Safety System. Today, commercial flights over open water must report their positions at least every 15 minutes. Underwater signaling devices now carry 90-day batteries with improved physical placement, and manufacturers are testing satellite streaming for cockpit voice data. Yet, these reforms are lessons, not resolutions. They expose a lasting tension between sophisticated tracking systems and the sheer physical scale of the ocean. Technology can preserve evidence, but it cannot reconstruct events that were never recorded. Without the primary wreckage and flight recorders, 4 basic questions remain open. Who or what altered the flight's course? Why did communication stop? Where exactly did the aircraft come down? And what happened inside the cabin during those final hours? Until those answers are found, responsible investigation must preserve uncertainty instead of replacing it with an attractive story. We live in an era of absolute connectivity, where we assume everything is tracked. Yet, the Indian Ocean continues to guard its deepest secret. For the families, this is not a historical mystery. It is an ongoing vigil. Until the wreckage is found, MH370 remains a haunting reminder of how easily our most advanced technology can be swallowed by the dark.